Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, lads and lads. Welcome to the YouTube channel. It's going to be a episode of Rally with a Racquet podcast. Now, these are going to be released once a week. That's the goal, at least for 2020. Be good for me to do this. And we'll just alter episodes each time. If we do find a guest, it'll be longer episodes. And, it'll be a little bit more funner. But we'll get them out on a weekly basis. If I don't find anyone, I'll just do it by myself, which is completely fine by me. Just before we get into the topic of Overwatch, I want to give a little bit of awareness to the bushfires in Australia, if you're outside of it. We have been having bushfires for quite a while now, and firefighters have been working relentlessly in order to contain them. Unfortunately, wildlife and a bunch of houses have been absolutely abolished. People have died, and it's been an absolute nightmare for the Australian community because half of our country is covered in smoke. In fact, several times throughout these months, we've been diagnosed as having the most unhealthy air properties in terms of other countries, even surpassing like New York and China and stuff like that. We had the most polluted air because of the smoke that is coming out from the bushfire. Very unhealthy. My voice is sort of altered as a result of it for the moment. And, I can't imagine how bad it'd be for people who do have allergies, asthma, some sort of throat, problem that would make it even worse multiplicatively. There's raising awareness for that, guys. Luckily, our government have just started to respond, after a while. So it's really unfortunate. I don't want to get too political on this show because I don't really like dipping into politics. But let's just say it took them too long to respond, and hopefully we don't have this issue ever again. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So, talking about Overwatch, fellas. Now, before we talk about the actual game, I wanted to get something out of the way in terms of the talent. As someone who has been involved with coaching the contenders, started his own Overwatch podcast along with Whipley, as someone who has done a little bit of amateur commentary for a lot of the beginning tournaments for Overwatch within Division 2, like Cyber Gamer events and stuff like that, Watchpoint. And as someone who has stage hosted a couple of times as well, Overwatch has been a game that I've been involved within about 2 years. And before we get into natural talent issues, I want to talk about my own personal issues with Overwatch. So you can see a little bit of a relay between understanding. Now, the reason why I left Overwatch particularly is because the development team for me was way too slow in their actions. And as someone who wants to study the game, I suppose, or at that stage, I think when you're both a caster and a coach, you do study the game. Maybe you focus on different things in both of those avenues. Yes, that's right. You're completely correct. But you still study the game just at different levels, and you'll be focusing on different aspects of Overwatch either way. And when you're invested, you start to pick upon these little things. You start to pick upon the broader subject. You start to try to do more evaluations on a daily basis, on a daily basis about the game, about yourself, and you start to think a shit ton about it. Since you, especially me, I was involved in the game for quite a little bit. Now, through these constant evaluations, I was sort of questioning myself through whether it be game mechanics, whether it be visual noisiness, through it be the lack of tournaments. I was questioning myself, saying, is it really worth me having this investment into a game that, one, I don't know is going to that is not going to succeed because they are dipping everything into Overwatch League, and which is questionable if it will work. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Two, I'm not sure about my personal status within the scene, even though I have done a decent amount for the grassroots in terms of participating in community tournaments that other people wouldn't otherwise, in terms of um, you know, helping, especially at the start of the scene, teams that weren't even considered to be teams, but just giving them a helping hand so they can have feet to stand on. In terms of creating a podcast to have to give the players a voice and to entertain and have something for the oceanic scene to look at. Um, you know, and in terms of trying to actively improve myself with casting, but there was really nothing much to do aside for the community ones. But the community casting didn't offer anything after that. You know, you're helping and developing yourself, sure, but there wasn't a stepping stone. And you know, people like Cyberwaste, who has been doing these community tournaments for a very long time. You know, I suppose at the time I could put myself in that category where Bobby J and I were doing scrimcasts for about 3 hours every day. 3 hours of our life we'd take out so we can practice our casting, and we'd live stream it to entertain people. There was no sort of transition for me personally, um, because of the way that the tournaments were restricted and Blizzard was cucking people. This was not only cucking players, this was cucking talent and our development, which means we had to like go over old VODs because there was nothing to do. Because at that time, we're leading up towards contenders, and you know, if I were to volunteer to cast over a scrim, they, you know, players understandably would say no because they'd want to conceal their strategies leading into contenders so they can have the most chance of winning. So this, as a result, halted a lot of my progress and killed all motivation to pursue casting in Overwatch. Because at the end of the day, if you're ESL, if you're whatever organization, they're going to most likely result into, you know, dealing with their own guys. Elfish and Sandman are the absolute best talent for the job, and they are involved with ESL, so it is less payments on their side, I presume, because they are under contract. Because I believe that how that works with other like titles like PUBG and stuff. And it was the best decision for them. And I'm not salty about that. I'm just saying, like, overall, these guys have been involved in esports for such a long time. Why would you take a gamble on other people, right? Especially in an established league that I'm sure they would have been fighting for rights. You know, but before contenders started in Australia, there was a lot of talk as to who would actually hold the rights to broadcast contenders, and ESL eventually ended up getting it, and Elfish Guy and Sandman did a fantastic job. Especially, you know, Elfish Guy, who has done so many esports. This guy is so incredibly talented, and he picked up Overwatch so quickly, and his style of commentary is brilliant, like phenomenal. One of my favorites in terms of looking at the VODs and just like listening and like closing my eyes and just visualizing the game, and like he's a very good commentator. But for me, I weighed up my options and I'm like, okay, is there a chance of me breaking through and actually commentating with these guys? Probably not, because one, they're at a different level. Two, how would I be able to practice if there are no tournaments? And if there are tournaments, there's no guarantee of sort of a progression system because they're completely irrelevant to what contenders is anyway. And I forgot my third point, but anyway, we'll just use those 2 points right there. But yeah, it was unfortunate, and it just killed all my motivation for that particular for me to pursue that. So I had 2 other experiments that I personally went on, which one is hosting the Overtime podcast, which was fantastic to start for the first 2 seasons, because it sort of reignited my passion. I feel like the one problem Australian esports has in general is that there's no one to sort of stir the water in terms of talent. Now, players are fantastic at this. We have a bunch of really good shit talkers, But everyone in the talent is very reserved, and they don't want to step on anyone's feet. Now, I believe this could be a variety of reasons. My main reason as to why this is because our scene is so small, and we have a lot of people who wear different hats. So if you talk about a player in, I wouldn't say an unprofessional way, but like you're criticizing them harshly, or if you're doing this about a team or whatever, you're like, it doesn't bode too well because everything's so constructed so tight together. And my goal with overtime was, from me especially being like the heel of the podcast, was to be someone who was against the grain and to not suck the dick of every single team and player, because that is not what an analyst is supposed to do, right? Like, this is why before doing the podcast and during the podcast, I've done analysts. Like, I was the analyst for several different teams beforehand. I was at the time coaching while doing the podcast because I did have those different takes that some other people may not have, and I could be more critical in that regard. And this, in my opinion, is what OC esports needs. Not me, but someone who can actively criticize without having the problem of someone stepping down on them and purging them from the scene, because you have that risk of being outcasted. I'm not being controversial for the sake of being controversial. I'm being critical so I can give people different perspectives and avenues to look at. Now, of course, I'm not pointing any fingers when I'm saying, people are sucking dick, or they're being not critical about certain things. I just think this is just a problem OCE esports has had in a whole, because we are, I wouldn't say too friendly. That maybe would be a correct way to phrase it. We are a little bit too friendly when it comes to these criticisms, and players do a fantastic job on it, and players who have been outspoken have been recognized globally. But our talent is so reserved when it comes to being critical, and we need sort of more people who are outspoken in our esports industry within Australia, so we can actually try and solve a lot of these issues. So I created the podcast along with Whipley, full intention of me being the sort of heel of the podcast, so I can stir more conversations. Sure, I got shit fucking wrong, but I admitted to it every single time. Every single time. I was modest in that regard. I was humble. I didn't claim to be better than anyone in terms of coaching, or being the better analyst or whatever. I just made my own opinions clear. I tried not to contradict myself, and there we go. I laid everything out there, and if I was wrong, stick out the finger to me, say I'm an idiot, but if I was right, give me that same respect in return. It's all about developing those types of characters. I mean, several memes were made about it, Racquet Prime, which is fucking fantastic, thanks to, I believe, Froggo, who made that meme. Where it's like my eyes are red and I had my hand like this and it looked like I was powering up, and there was a text over it saying, you call them predictions but I call them facts, referring to what my predictions. It's fantastic the amount of memes we got out of that podcast, and props to Whipley, who did a fantastic job at accompanying me and dealing with my shit. And then that transitioned into the snowball version, which was Watch Point. No, the one after that. No, still quite over time at the time. I think this is how much of a fucking boomer I am. And props to Ducky, because this guy is probably the hardest working person in all of OCE sports that I've witnessed. I've witnessed a lot of people slack off, including myself, when it comes to reviewing yourself and trying to get better. But this guy is just an absolute machine and pumping out content, and I respect that a shit ton. Unfortunately, during that sort of transition, I lost a lot of my love for the game, and I wasn't really involved in the scene per se, like because during the first 2 seasons or first season, whatever, I was watching, the game daily. I was in scrims daily, like for hours upon end. I was watching Overwatch League. I was watching contenders from different regions. I had like several different perspectives, and during that sort of last phase, I wasn't as confident as myself as I should have been. That's why I decided to sort of lay that mantle off and say, no, you know what, I'm not good enough for this anymore, and let other people step up to it, which is completely fine. And that's why I announced my departure from Overwatch later on. When I didn't have that sort of passion, because if you don't have the passion for it, I believe that's when you have to let it go. Even though I think in terms of commentary, Overwatch is a game that I really, really enjoy doing that. But I don't enjoy the game itself, unfortunately, for a variety of different reasons. So we've pretty much covered a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about in terms of commentary, in terms of the podcast, a little bit in terms of coaching as well. I want to dip into about. Now, I really appreciate the Legacy group for recruiting me into that process, because it might have been because of my YouTube channel, and I was posting constant analysis on it, like a few times a week, based on different concepts that I thought about Overwatch and video games in general. And of course, being like an analyst commentator as well, maybe they were impressed with what I said. And with like well, I wouldn't say zero coaching experience, but zero high tier into contenders experience, they decided to pick me up. I've done teams for like Open Division in the past. I've been involved with Scylla and teams like that beforehand, but not as the head guy. It's a big difference for me. And I was working with Tim, which people may know as Volt, who is currently a league coach. What I think it was previously for Dire Wolves, or the ones before that, I forgot. Chiefs as well. Someone who I greatly respect and taught me a lot about coaching. And at the time, our roster, we had Strawbella, Caramel Koala, Wuvo, Dench. I'm forgetting someone, aren't I? Oh, fuck, who am I missing? God, my League of Legends made a fucking notification sound. You know what? We'll pretend like the other players. Okay, Skull and Cindy. There we go. But yeah, I really respect those people, because out of all of the experiences in esports, that is like the most life-changing one. I'd say, because it gives me a great respect for coaches, with the amount of work that's involved, and like the payoff isn't exactly the most, right? Because you're like, in order to be an effective coach, you have to have like so much time on your hands, and you have to invest so much time into it, and in order to become a good coach. And I think in esports we don't have many good coaches in general, and I would class myself as not a good coach. The difference is a lot of those coaches aren't willing to admit that, and I think coaches should be classed as more of like a profession, and people need certain amount of experience in order to do that, which is, after the fact that me being involved with that personally. We had a boot camp, which is the most life-changing experience in esports for me. Legacy sorted that out for us. Stayed in a facility, well, not a facility. What did we stay at? I forgot. Somewhere in Sydney. We did team activities. This was for preparing for the contenders LAN. Hopefully, at the time we thought that we had an okay shot at making it. We ran into Order, which at the time probably second best team, and we didn't beat them. But at boot camp, we did our best preparation by far, and I felt like if I had that same sort of motivation at boot camp previously in terms of the coaching, we probably would have had a very, very good shot against Order. Our first 2 maps were very, very close, and the third was a little bit close, and the fourth was like a whitewash. So if we had I had the same motivation across the whole you know split, I feel like it would have done very well. We had pretty good upsets based on better coaching, I believe. My strategy against Serenity was very good, but if I had like the same read against because the good thing about and the bad thing about being a caster and transitioning into a coach is that like you look at both teams. Um, Now, the reason why it's a good thing is because you get to see both sides of the coin. You get to look at strengths and weaknesses and how those sort of matchups can work. The bad thing is sometimes you can focus a little bit on the enemy team, which is what I felt like I did instead of your own strengths and weaknesses. Um, which would work in certain scenarios, like run up against Serenity. A lot of them, people hailed them to be the dark horse of the season. And after we beat them, people were predicting that, Legacy might have a shot at getting land now. Like that was an absolutely like awesome response. Like we flogged them very, very hard, which was an awesome sort of feat at the time. But we couldn't really keep the consistency throughout the season, and unfortunately, when it came to order, we lost, which was to be expected at the time. But I feel like that was probably our best performance of the season because of the boot camp. I respect a lot of those players for allowing me to come in, and it was a life-changing experience, and it changes your perspective on how much coaches have to do. Let me silence that phone. Hold up. There we go. But yeah, it was an awesome experience nonetheless, and I wouldn't change it for a thing. I felt like I needed a little bit more practice. I feel like with coaching, you need to be a little bit more older and have sort of extensive experiences in that sort of area, because you have different styles of coaching. You have like the person who knows absolutely everything but doesn't know how to speak whatsoever, and you have the coaches who can talk a lot of shit but don't know much about the game that much. So we need to sort of find that correct recipes and blends in order to build the big super coach. We've had, I've had a lot of the privilege of working with coaches that have made and done better things. I've extensively worked, well, not extensively, I've worked with John Galt for a little bit, and hearing how he talks, because he's had, life experience that has been relevant to what that field may have been, in terms of being a leader. He was once in the army, and that really helped to sort of extend his arm and ask his players to command the respect because of how he conducted himself as a person, as a coach, as a leader. And I felt like that really helped his transition from being a contenders coach into an Overwatch League one. I've worked with extensively with Volt, who works in the OPL as a coach. He does a fantastic job. He's a really, really, really smart person. And I sort of learnt how to talk to the players properly from him. He's very good at addressing things and being a very honest person and knowing how to get around the minds of a player. And I respect that a lot, because sometimes it can be a little bit dicey trying to extract information from players. And coming from a lot of different perspectives, and it's very important for a coach to try and understand how to dissect that information from a player and transition both and have an active flow, a stream of the conversation in order to improve your outcome in that scenario. But yeah, coaching, really, really hard thing to do, and hey, if you're not good at it, then I recommend a shit ton of practice and doing it with lower teams rather than you get to the big leagues and attempt to do it. I wouldn't consider contenders big league, but it's amateur league. Now let's sort of gloss around Overwatch League for a little bit, and then we'll talk about the game. Now for Overwatch League, it's a shame to see their biggest talent depart. One of the reasons why I transitioned from League to Overwatch League is because of Monte Cristo going to Overwatch League, and he was my favourite caster at the time, and still is. And him leaving, along with Puckett, with Malik, with Doa, Semler, so many talented people leaving the league. I won't go into the reasons because I'm not 100% sure as to why that happened, but it's definitely going to affect it. because one of the reasons why, like, and this is something not many people are actually talking about. They talk about it in the game, but they never talk about it in terms of the talent. And this is something that you sort of can expect from someone who has, who thinks about the talent a little bit more because they've been involved a little bit. But talent actually can draw from different games, especially when you come from one sector. That person comes from one sector. That person comes from one sector. They develop a fan base, and they say, "Oh my god! Like my favorite caster, Monte Cristo, is going into the Overwatch League. This is what I personally did. I'm gonna check out how the Overwatch League is. I'm gonna check out how Overwatch is because if he's doing it, he's a really smart person. I'm gonna try and wrap my brain around to see like what's the reward in this." Um, Same with Semlar. He's a highly touted, fantastic CS:GO commentator who went into Overwatch League. They're getting different aspects, different aspects of commentators from different games, and they're building them all together in what the Overwatch League was. Now, with a lot of them departing, you're going to lose a little bit of the fan base there. I'm not going to say it's going to destroy the Overwatch League, but it is a little bit of a blow. I'm not really going to go into the reasons, as I just said before, but there was an article this morning released saying it could be because of pay issues. A lot of the cuts were introduced this league, I assume because of travel too, would have been one of the other reasons, and the change of management which Monty leaded upon his departure. So it could be for a variety of different reasons, but I don't think it's my job to announce any false information or anything like that, or assume anything, because those guys left on their own accord, and good luck to them in the future. Hopefully things pan out. But yeah, Overwatch League is going to be truly tested this year. I mean, we said that last year, went okay, but this is when the true test begins, when traveling is involved, and that's when shit can sort of get dicey. I mean, the prime example of like intense travel will probably be wrestling. That's way more intense than the Overwatch League, but those guys are like professional trained athletes. These guys are gamers. It's definitely going to play a part in terms of performance, I think, and hopefully the players can adapt to that. But let's talk about the actual game. Now, Overwatch is very, very visually noisy. You have a variety of different barriers, you have a variety of different projectiles, just a lot of things that make the game a little bit more difficult to sort of look at visually. Everything looks sort of messy, which is sort of strange for Blizzard, because Blizzard usually have a very clean outlook, and they've managed to make Overwatch look messy, in my opinion. Now, possibly the main reason why I decided to leave the game, that's one of the reasons, is because of their slow patch releases. They're very, very slow with updating things. With HOTS, they're releasing a champion out every month. With Hearthstone, they're releasing expansions quite often. With Overwatch, they were so incredibly slow into adapting to what the players needed, and it's sort of like every single time they create a different problem, and they just want to flip it on its head and be like, no, we're supporting you guys, and let's do something completely out of the blue and then fuck something else over. So they can never have a very good adaptive plan to what the problem is. I mean, this is one of the main reasons why HOTS never succeeded as an esport, or reason why it's dead. I apologize for that. I mean, HOTS is a game I really enjoyed on a casual basis, but you need to make your carry players carry and shine, and Overwatch, especially during the long phases of the GOATS meta and like the triple tank meta, you had situations where you had your star players on like role play characters like Brig and like fucking characters that don't do anything effectively in those comps, like shoot the shield. I want to shoot their heads. What the hell? Like I want to use my aim to actually win this game, but I can't. I just have to role play, which is disappointing, because that is in reality what brings the big viewers in esports, is when you see like that huge massive outplay, when you see that Dragon Blade that gets like 5 kills. Oh my god, that's amazing. He just like deflected the flashbang and he like went up in the air, like dodged all these things. Where's the outplay potential in these, these tanky compositions that fucking stare at each other for 30 seconds into a stalemate? Like, yes, okay, pro players, you're really cool. We understand what's happening in these fights. People who have been in the scene for a while understand the intricate little, tug of wars within these fights. But I'm sorry, a lot of the viewing that is going to be happening with your video game going to be from casual fucking fans. They don't understand these fucking concepts that you've been training for in scrims for hours and hours and practicing with your coach, nailing it into your head. They don't have that same privilege as you do. So when you mention these concepts, these strategies that are so fucking intricate and small to the naked eye, and you expect people to entertain themselves with this bullshit, I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. They're not going to clap at a fucking shield bash in the middle of a fight when a Reinhardt just runs out of his shield. Are you kidding me? That's not fun. It's not a fun thing to do. And when all of a sudden this meta in the Overwatch League transitioned into our ranked games as well, you're making the casual player base suffer here. Overwatch has always managed to fuck up in terms of the balance between giving the pros what they want, giving the casual players what they want. And guess what? Most of the time, they haven't successfully ticked either box at the same time. At least fucking have one of them ticked. It's actual garbage. Good shit, Blizzard. You know what? Fucking fantastic. Fantastic. Now, I'm not exactly in the loop recently in terms of what the meta is. Sigma, fucking Ligma, whatever you want to call them. He doesn't seem like a very in tune type champion because he counters flankers, which already weren't exactly the best to run in the meta. But it's not my space to comment on what's there currently, but I'm just talking about the past because I was involved in the past. So whatever. If the meta's in a fine spot now, pros, you can call me out on that. But we just need situations where we have these outplay heroes and people who specialize in aiming very well. They can actually shine where it matters. We don't want Overwatch to become a dull role-play game. We want it to have outplay potential. We want it to have that star shine to carry through our younger generation of players. That's what you advertised Overwatch. We want to have a situation where you can adapt on the fly, switch these compositions. We don't want to see the same fucking comp on every single point. This was the main advertisement of Overwatch. We're going to have a free-flowing game where you can change heroes whenever you want to. But guess what? That's not very fucking useful, is it, when everyone's playing the same shit? Sure, there are situations when you swap off. Sure, at certain points where the high ground may be more useful, you want to pick snipers or like characters have more mobility. But man, okay. Cool stuff. It really pisses me off. It really does. Because I'm passionate about this game. I really wanted Overwatch to succeed. And they bring us this marketing bullshit of what Overwatch 2 is. Probably won't solve any issues. It's PvE for most of the part. We're being scammed by Blizzard. We honestly are. Being scammed. Props to them. They started a new genre. This hero shooter type thing. But I hope Riot does what they do best. And copy off another franchise and fucking make it so much better. I hope they do that, because Riot are very good at that. And Riot aren't the most innovative people, but they're very good at acknowledging mistakes from other companies. Like, what the fuck, why are they doing that shit? We'll do it better. They've done it with everything that they've done, pretty much. Everything. And yes, I am calling League better than Dota. Boom. I'm not going to lie, fellas. It's a short little rant. When I played Dota, the clicking system in that game, I felt like my character had schizophrenia. Like, I was clicking forward and then they'd like go forward and run back. I'm like, what the fuck? What's he doing over there? What is this? They just had some weird pathing issues in Dota when I was playing, man. Maybe it's fine now. Maybe it isn't. But I swear clicking in that game, like, I might as well be using a fucking controller at that point. Character models are so irresponsive. Anyway, we're going on a rant here. I just hope Overwatch fixes their shit, because I fell in love with the game quite early and I was involved with it in 2 years of my life. I invested so much into it. Sort of like that, ex that you want to get back with, but you're like, no, I don't want to do that shit. They're like, but they were cancerous to my life. I want the best for Overwatch, and if they do fix a lot of their shit, I will come back. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to be fixing any of their shit. You can look at all the signs of decreasing player base, a lot of their talent leaving. It's really sad to see a bunch of pros retiring from the game. They just don't have fun with it anymore. Now, of course, when you're going to be spending a large amount of your time on a sport or an esport, it becomes a little bit less fun because it feels like a job. But these guys, like, are just so mind-numbingly bored from the game, and they don't like how Blizzard's handling things, and they're very slow off the gun and trying to respond to these type of things. I understand that frustration. I don't exactly have the answer, and I think a lot of people don't have the answer. But I guess the simple thing I'm going to say now is at least try to address these issues quicker. You have a variety of different realms: the tournament realm, Overwatch League, contenders, you scrim on different things. You have the live server. All of these in different patches, so your practice is neutered as a result of that. Just try and make these patches quicker, so we can at least attempt to make things better again. You can respond to the community easier. The community is an outcry always in Overwatch, but at least try to respond to these quicker. That's all I want to say. I don't have the answer, fellas. I won't pretend I do. But, man, it is a very hard thing to tackle. And that's all pretty much I wanted to talk about for this episode. Covered casting, coaching, a little bit of a podcast, Overwatch. I'm pretty happy with it. We'll try and reach, this sort of 30-minute and beyond mark each time for the podcast. And thank you guys for watching this. Once again, spreading awareness of bushfire. If you are not aware of it, you are now aware of it. Praying to all those families who are in need. Hopefully you guys are okay. Love all you guys, and subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy this content. Give it a like. Yada 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 yada. This has been Racquet on the Rally with Rocket podcast. Rocket? Racquet. Huh. Silly me.